Have you ever wondered what was on the menu for dinner 10,000 years ago? Forget takeout and supermarkets. Our ancestors' tables were a direct reflection of the world around them, shaped by rugged landscapes, changing climates, and sheer ingenuity. From the icy plains of the north to the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean and the fertile river valleys of the east, the story of humanity is deeply intertwined with the story of its food. Today, we're embarking on a global culinary journey back in time, exploring what ancient people really ate and how their diets laid the foundation for the foods we enjoy today. So, grab a snack, maybe some nuts or berries, and let's travel back to the dinner tables of the distant past. Let's begin our journey deep in the Stone Age, a time stretching back millions of years when survival was a daily challenge. For our hunter-gatherer ancestors, the world was their pantry. Imagine small, nomadic groups navigating vast, untamed wilderness. Life was a constant search for calories. The men often took on the dangerous task of hunting. They weren't just chasing small game. We have evidence of them taking down mammoths, woolly rhinos, and giant wild boars. These hunts were epic undertakings, requiring incredible cooperation, bravery, and sophisticated stone tools. A successful hunt meant a massive bounty of protein and fat, crucial for surviving harsh winters and fueling their physically demanding lives. Every part of the animal was used, from the meat for food to the hides for clothing and the bones for tools and shelter. But hunting was only half the story. The gathering part of hunter-gatherer was just as, if not more, important. While the men were often out on the hunt, women and children scoured the landscape for edible plants. This wasn't just random foraging. They possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of their local environment, passed down through generations. They knew which berries were sweet, which nuts were energy-rich, and which roots were safe to eat. They'd gather handfuls of wild raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. Dig for starchy tubers and roots. They collected protein-packed nuts like acorns and hazelnuts, which often required processing to remove toxins. Even common plants we might see as weeds, like nettles and dandelions, were valuable sources of vitamins and minerals. This diet, incredibly diverse and dependent on the season, was rich in fiber, lean protein, and micronutrients. It was the original paleo diet, a way of eating dictated entirely by what nature provided. For hundreds of thousands of years, this was the human story. But around 12,000 years ago, something extraordinary began to happen. A shift so profound it would change the course of human history forever. We call it the Agricultural Revolution. In a region known as the Fertile Crescent, encompassing modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Egypt, people started to experiment with cultivating wild grasses. Instead of just gathering wild wheat and barley, they began to save the seeds and plant them deliberately. This was the dawn of agriculture. Imagine the scene, small nomadic bands slowly giving way to settled communities. The first villages began to sprout up near the fertile banks of rivers like the Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile. Life was no longer a constant migration. It was about tending to the land. This new way of life brought a completely different diet. Grains became the cornerstone of human nutrition. Fields of golden barley and emmer wheat stretched across the landscape. People learned to grind these grains into flour to make the first forms of bread simple, unleavened flatbreads cooked on hot stones. This was a reliable, storable source of carbohydrates that could sustain growing populations. Alongside these staple grains, they domesticated animals like goats, sheep, and cattle, providing a steady supply of milk, cheese, and meat. The garden also made its debut. In the bustling markets of early cities in Mesopotamia and Egypt, you'd find an array of new vegetables. Vibrant stalls would be piled high with leeks, garlic, onions, lentils, chickpeas, and sweet figs. This shift wasn't just about food. It was about stability, community, and the birth of civilization itself, all built on a foundation of cultivated grains and farmed animals. Now, let's sail across the sea to the classical world of ancient Greece and Rome. Here, the diet was intimately connected to the Mediterranean landscape, rocky hillsides, a sun-drenched climate, and the sparkling blue sea. The Mediterranean triad formed the core of their cuisine: olives, grapes, and grain. Olive groves were everywhere, their silvery green leaves shimmering in the sun. Olives were pressed to create liquid gold, olive oil. It was used for everything: cooking, lighting, as a lotion, and even as a form of payment. It was the primary source of fat in their diet. Vineyards climbed up the hillsides, producing grapes that were eaten fresh, dried into raisins, and, of course, fermented into wine. Wine, often diluted with water, was the staple drink for nearly everyone, seen as safer than potentially contaminated water sources. Bread, made from wheat or barley, was the other pillar of their diet. For the poor, it might be a coarse, dark loaf, eaten with a few olives or a piece of cheese. For the wealthy, it was a finer, whiter bread. The sea provided a bounty of protein. Fishing boats would return with nets full of tuna, mackerel, sardines, and anchovies. Fish was often salted and preserved to be eaten throughout the year, while red meat was a luxury, usually reserved for festivals and sacrifices. Fish and seafood were common. Their plates were also filled with vegetables like cabbage, lettuce, and asparagus, and legumes like fava beans and lentils were essential. The ancient Mediterranean diet was simple, fresh, and deeply tied to the land and sea, a healthy way of eating whose benefits we still celebrate today. But the story of ancient food is a global one, and different environments created vastly different culinary traditions. Let's journey east to ancient China. Here, in the fertile valleys of the Yellow and Yangtze rivers, a different grain was king. Rice. For thousands of years, the lives of millions revolved around the cultivation of rice. Intricate paddies, shimmering like mirrors, terraced the hillsides. The planting, flooding, and harvesting of rice was a labor-intensive cycle that defined the rhythm of life. Steamed rice was the centerpiece of every meal, providing the bulk of calories. Alongside rice, millet was also a key staple, especially in the drier northern regions. The Chinese also pioneered the cultivation of soybeans, which they brilliantly transformed into products like tofu and soy sauce, providing a vital source of protein. Their diet was rich in vegetables like bok choy and Chinese cabbage, and they foraged for a wide variety of mushrooms. Pork and chicken were the most common meats, and the art of balancing flavors, salty, sweet, sour, and bitter was already a cornerstone of their sophisticated cuisine. Now, let's cross the Pacific to the Americas, a world completely separate from the Old World until a few centuries ago. Here, civilizations flourished with a completely different set of ingredients. In Mesoamerica, the Maya and Aztec cultures were built upon three incredible crops, so vital they were known as the Three Sisters: corn, beans, and squash. Corn, or maize, was the sacred staple. It was ground into flour for tortillas or made into porridges. Beans, often grown climbing up the corn stalks, provided essential amino acids that corn lacked, creating a complete protein. Squash grew low to the ground, its large leaves shading the soil, preventing weeds and keeping the ground moist. This ingenious symbiotic farming system sustained vast populations. Their diet was further enriched with tomatoes, chili peppers, avocados, and chocolate ingredients that would one day revolutionize global cuisine. In the Andes of South America, the Inca Empire thrived at high altitudes thanks to the potato, which they cultivated in hundreds of varieties, and quinoa, a protein-packed super grain. These were diets perfectly adapted to their unique environments, showcasing the incredible agricultural innovation of the Americas. From the Paleolithic hunt to the first harvest, from the olive groves of Rome to the rice paddies of China and the cornfields of the Americas, our ancestors' relationship with food has been a story of adaptation, innovation, and survival. Geography dictated what was available, but human ingenuity transformed those raw ingredients into cuisines that could sustain families, communities, and entire civilizations. The bread we eat, the wine we drink, the rice in our bowls, so many of our staple foods have a history stretching back thousands of years. They are the legacy of our ancestors' tables. The next time you sit down for a meal, take a moment to think about the incredible journey those ingredients have taken through history to reach your plate. It's a delicious connection to our shared human story. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more adventures into the past. See you next time.